So the First Descendant dev team just revealed a ton of brand new info in a new interview. Yes, finally it looks like a rework for the experience system is coming. We're going to be talking about a complete weapon overhaul, reactor management, shield buffs, and it looks like we could be getting a system to retroactively transfer normal Descendant progress to an ultimate. That sounds pretty interesting. Now, before we get into this interview, I got to thank the dude that actually translated this, Carpenter Content 2349. Thank you so much for translating this. But yeah, keep in mind that some of this is translated, so some of it might be a little bit weird. Let's do this. Let's get into the most important stuff first. So let's head on over to the First Descendant alerts, who has some nice formatting on this. Another thing I wanted to ask about is that there was very little motivation to play non-Ultimate Descendants. This was because Ultimate Descendants were perfect upgrades to regular Descendants. How do you plan to motivate players to use regular Descendants? Here's the answer. This is an issue we're considering pretty important and in need of an update. We intend for players to experience and use regular Descendants first before moving on to Ultimates, but since regular Descendants pale in comparison to Ultimates in the endgame, most people just didn't bother with them and waited for Ultimates. We haven't decided on the exact method yet, but we're thinking of a system where growth in regular Descendants can be retroactively applied or transferred to Ultimate Descendants. It sounds like a lot of people are really wanting some sort of system like this in place. No specifics exactly how this will work. It sounds like it would take some time to develop, but hey, they aren't saying no to this whatsoever. Now, next up, we have this right here. Is it the fundamental reason that it takes too long to max out a single Descendant? If Descendant growth was faster, wouldn't we see more diverse use of Descendants as you originally envisioned? Great question there. The answer is this. We didn't run any in-game events during the preseason. Starting from Season 1, we plan to boost growth externally through in-game events, and we're also planning on an overhaul update to experience point efficiency. I think growth speed will probably pick up compared to preseason, so it sounds like we're going to be getting an experience buff. So yeah, that's awesome to see, but it is going to be something that they're going to be experimenting with, it sounds like, season over season. Also, what about this one right here? And it says, I imagine you got a lot of feedback about reactor management. The difficulty of managing reactors was one reason why it was hard to switch between Descendants. Are there any planned improvements? Here's the response. There aren't any reactor-related changes in this update, but we're having pretty in-depth discussions about changing the reactor system. It's an issue I noticed when I play the game too. Just finding the reactor I was using becomes a problem every time I switch Descendants. For now, we plan to let players categorize preferred items into 8 categories, making it easier to quickly find needed reactors. Later on, we're planning to allow players to expand the weapon types that meet conditions through reactor enhancement. So instead of constantly farming reactors for each weapon you use, you'll be able to meet conditions through enhancements as long as the additional options match. Now, we're also aware that farming reactors is a very grueling process. It's not just the repetitive content, but probably the most tedious part is examining and categorizing the options on each farmed reactor. So we're planning to introduce an additional random option filter to the junk filter. This means equipment without pre-specified options will automatically become junk with just one button press. Wow, so they're really going in here and trying to think of everything to improve the game, of course, in the right direction. But yeah, I agree. The reactor management is definitely right now something that is needing great improvement. It's just kind of a pain. Now, we also have this. I also want to ask about ultimate unique weapons. Except for a few weapons, their usefulness is very low. Besides new weapons being added, are there plans to improve existing low utility weapons? Here's the reply. To be honest, I didn't think you'd believe me if I just said it, so I was planning to show results one by one later. But to tell you in advance, we're preparing reworks and balancing for all of them. All the weapons and Descendants currently deemed useless will have their day in the sun someday. For Season 1, major changes are planned for Ajax, Blair, and Jaber. So they're going to start with those 3 Descendants first and foremost, because I feel like a lot of you guys have the most complaints about those Descendants, that they're completely underutilized. I am extremely curious to see how those are received when we hit Season 1 here. This is going to be interesting. All right, next up we have this one. It was also pointed out that the shield factor in defense has very low utility. The current meta focuses on health and defense, and in extreme cases, even defense is ignored. Are there plans to increase the utility of shields? Isn't the shield important for Descendants like Kyle? Here's the response here. I don't think the current meta will change just by improving modding. What's crucial is that the content guides the player's patterns. There needs to be content, where shields are necessary for shield-related research to naturally occur and for shield-based modding to be created. I think the health meta has become dominant because we're not ready for that yet. As more content is added in the future, I think research on shields will naturally follow. So there you have that one right there. Let's keep going, shall we? So this was actually the beginning of the interview, but it is very important. It says, let's start with the recent news. The update schedule was originally announced as 3 parts, but then changed to 2, and the timeline was significantly moved up. Considering the development schedule, that couldn't have been easy. Are you guys okay? I love the questioning there. Are you okay, dev team? Now, we have a response. We got a lot of feedback saying the 3rd update was too far off, so we knew we had to do something about it. The problem was that early October has quite a few holidays, plus there's something like a company anniversary, so we weren't sure if we could make the schedule work. In the end, we just decided everyone would come into work. Wow, the devotion. And then it says, so far, no employees have objected. They seem to be hitting the like button out of habit, but I'm not sure if they really like it. Taking all that into account and ensuring the bare minimum survival of our staff, the wording there. This is the fastest schedule we could come up with. Again, this is translated, so bear that in mind. So yeah, once again, kudos to this dev team. They are just so different compared to other dev teams for sure. Now, it says it's been about 2 months since you launched the live service in early July. I imagine there have been a lot of internal changes during the preseason. Have there been any shifts in your development direction or operational policies, like how you handle OP characters or content structure design? Here's the response. Let's talk about OP builds first. The strength of OP builds that players are currently grinding out is within our expectations. However, the speed at which they're doing it is much faster than we anticipated before the service launched. We thought we'd only need to worry about how the content would handle these powerful builds once we hit season 1. But we've had to think about this since preseason. We've been constantly brainstorming what kind of content in season 1 can keep up with this. Also, the direction of builds was somewhat different from what we expected. We thought a wider variety of builds would be used, but ultimately, builds that drastically increase damage output to skip patterns and reduce time became the norm. You can say that the average user specs have skyrocketed towards offense rather than defense or utility. While we didn't predict this, looking at the situation, it was inevitable. Players always seek the most efficient method, so builds that allow for quick, repeat attempts naturally became efficient. This led to builds focused on extreme damage increase. As a result, our direction has shifted from various gimmicks and diversity to faster combat, more monsters, and more loot. Overall, we're moving towards eliminating gimmicks that forcibly take up time. For example, we've completely removed the mechanic of escorting while depleting shields from high-level infiltration operations, and we've changed all the time-consuming capture zones to pure extermination. Actually, in the early stages of development, we only had exterminations. During internal testing, we added various types of gimmicks because it seemed like it would be more fun to have more mechanics, but now it feels like we've come full circle. This direction of change applies directly to invasion mode, introduced in season 1. While invasion has puzzle gimmicks, it's designed so that if gamers figure it out quickly, they can trigger an overload and progress without necessarily having to wait. So yeah, I had a feeling that that's the direction it was going to be heading in. I did mention that, it looks like they're going to probably have to add more monsters, mobs, that sort of thing to really counteract some of these OP builds. And it seems like that's what they're going to be focused up on in the future. It's just that, once you start doing that sort of thing, you have to worry about the performance of the game. But anyway, let's talk about sockets. So it says, is the socket type change being introduced in season 1 as a result of these considerations? The response is this: yes, that's right. As I mentioned earlier, we hope players would rotate through various descendants, but realistically, there were far more attempts to concentrate growth on one descendant and make them an all-rounder. However, currently, once you expand a socket, you can't change its type, so it's difficult to change the direction of your build even using the preset function. It's also hard to attempt build changes because even if you use additional catalysts to change socket types, you still have to level up again. So we're changing it so that once you apply a catalyst, you can freely change socket types. This allows more diverse attempts, and you could save these to presets so you can switch to any build you need at any time. Nice. So that's a really good change right there. But again, I've seen your comments and you guys are saying like, hey, we want even more improvements to the system. Sound off if you guys are happy with what they're currently doing now. We have this one. I also want to ask about the balance between gunplay and power fantasy. Although all Descendants have unique abilities, their utility varies greatly. For some Descendants, it's better just to use gunplay without their abilities. What do you think about this? And the response is this. I think this issue will also be mitigated as we add more content. For example, Lepik and Bunny are currently showing powerful performance. Lepik is strong at dealing massive damage, while Bunny excels at handling wide areas. On the other hand, it's true that Descendants like Freyna, Blair, and SMO don't have specialized uses in the current content structure. Once we provide content where these Descendants are highly useful, research will naturally progress. I think a time will come when players will fulfill their power fantasy by utilizing Descendant skills in addition to simple gunplay. And again, this is one direction that I was expecting them to take, to really have some content, perhaps even seasons focused around a specific group of Descendants to really elevate them, to say, hey, you know what? Now it's your time to try out these Descendants. We know that you guys have been complaining that they are underpowered, but hey, these Descendants really shine in the new content. So I see that's what they're going to be doing. You know, Diablo 4 has had a lot of success taking that route. So yeah, it makes only sense that they would also do the same thing. And now it's time to go over your top comments. Remember, leave a comment down below. It could end up right here in a future video. But man, I just realized it's been like nearly 5 days since I did a First Descendant video. I've been busy turning out some Warhammer content for you guys. Check that out if you missed it, because that game's looking badass. But anyway, here we go. It says, at least we see how devs listen to the community. That gives us hope this game will be better and better with each update. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I'm sticking around with this game. That's also one of the reasons why I'm sitting here making this video, because I'm hopeful about this game's future just by the way that they are respecting their community. It is just so different, and I love it. All right, someone mentions Bungie here. It says, hey, Nexon, knock this shit off. You aren't supposed to listen to player feedback and make positive changes so quickly. You're making the rest of us look bad. Exactly. It looks like competition here, as they say, is a good thing. So yeah, it looks like these other dev teams can't be sitting on their hands and not, taking their community seriously, or they're going to lose player numbers. There's a lot of different game options out there. And if dev teams are going to listen, players will migrate over to those other games where they're respected, All right, we also have this one. I have to admit that I failed to fully meet your expectations, the First Descendant producer. Wow, I'm speechless. What a breath of fresh air. Yep. All right, so there it is, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned here for more First Descendant news and updates. I have you guys covered, and I will see you all next time. Take care.